fellow travelers, welcome to the 82nd level of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turf. I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 human, wyvern rider, Mr. Garret Bland.
Oh.
Garret, how are you doing? I tried to come up with a Fire Emblem class off the top of my head. I got to the edge of the diary board.
Right there.
I realized that was a really dumb idea, but whatever.
No,
we went with it. We went with it. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Just chilling.
Yeah.
With my husbandos and waifus.
Yep.
Ready to get into it, talking all Fire Emblem. I love Fire Emblem, man. It's so good.
Yeah, same.
It's a great series.
I'm so excited for our talk tonight because tonight's episode all about Fire Emblem Engage. And before y'all turn off your dials, as if you're watching us on your old school television, we will not be talking about spoilers tonight. We'll talk about the story a little bit, but this is going to be like a spoiler-free, or as spoiler-free as humanly possible kind of discussion here. So just FYI, you don't have to worry about spoilers if you don't want to be spoiled on the game if you're still playing through it, because it's a long game, Garret. I don't know if you knew this. Fire Emblem Engage, pretty long game.
Not a short game.
No.
I would, it may be a little shorter than Three Houses.
Maybe.
So, Three Houses was a struggle for me.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone knows my experience with it, so.
We'll leave that off to the side. But before we get into all that, folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, if you're watching the live stream right now over at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, or if you're watching the video on demand later, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already, and then ding, 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 ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we go live with new videos, or let us know in the comments below who your favorite husbando or waifu is from Fire Emblem Engage or any of your other Fire Emblem favorite games. So let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're listening on audio feeds, don't forget to subscribe to us there as well. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you have an extra job. Just, throw us a little rating on there, maybe 5 stars if you think we're awesome. Maybe leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you're listening there. All that stuff helps the show get discovered. And then also, last but not least, if you want this and other podcasts a little bit early on the audio side, or if you want some exclusive content like the Console War Room with Mr. Badbit and Sean Capri, or the Uni Capri podcast, which we're actually recording tomorrow, you can head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/carpoolgaming, throw a little tip in the old tip jar, and out comes content. All right, without further ado, Garret, it is time to finally read from the sacred texts, because we got to talk about this game. This little old game that came out pretty recently, Fire Emblem Engage. I talked about it a lot actually on the Nintendo Drive with Seth and Sean last week, but I kind of gave like my kind of loose impressions, whereas this is going to be like a much more guided conversation. We have lots of stuff to go through, including how we played the game, how far we got, what we thought of the story overall, combat mechanics, because I know you and I, Garret, probably have lots to talk about when it comes to the combat mechanics for this game, as well as answering a bunch of y'all's questions. So I think that's what we're going to do tonight. It's going to be our kind of review discussion of Fire Emblem Engage, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it tonight. Rather than us posting like a normal 5-minute review, this will kind of live in infamy as our Fire Emblem review going forward. So
sounds good.
First of all, Garret, going into this, you may not know this, but going all the way back, we did a Fire Emblem episode on episode 9 where we talked about our history of the series, and we did a big overview of Fire Emblem. But there's been a lot of people who have started listening to the show recently, and they might not have checked out that episode. So I feel like it's good for us, a good exercise, to actually go through kind of our quick history with the Fire Emblem series, just for new listeners. Because we definitely know there's a lot of new listeners that are joining us in the cave. And also, huge thank you to everyone who's been, hopping in the Discord and chatting us up, or leaving us the giant, actually kind of comments in the YouTube comments. Those have been amazing to kind of go through as well.
They've been interesting. Yes.
Yeah. So huge thank you to everyone who's kind of been listening to the podcast, who's been discovering the podcast as of late. So Garret, I'm going to start with you, of course. Hit me up. What's your history with the Fire Emblem series?
Sure. I did not know what Fire Emblem was until Super Smash Brothers Melee, when I found good old Marth and Roy in the roster of Super Smash Brothers, and I didn't know what Fire Emblem was like during that time. I didn't know there was a game associated with them. I knew they may have come from something, but I never really sought out Fire Emblem during the time. I was like, oh, okay, those are some two cool new characters, and they follow up more in the next Smash Bros. And then when we got into the 3DS and Wii U era, that's when I think that was when Fire Emblem put a major push, and especially in the handheld scene.
Yeah.
And so my first Fire Emblem game was Awakening. Back in, oh man, this must have been 2014.
Yep.
I think that's when that game came out. And no, I still remember when I first got it. I instantly fell in love with it. Became one of my favorite Nintendo franchises. No, the first party franchises ever. So I really enjoy Awakening. That's still probably my favorite Fire Emblem game. I love the mechanics around it and the novelty behind it. And then I played Fire Emblem Conquest out of the Fire Emblem Fates trio. I did not play any others just because I think during the time I was just playing other games and I didn't want to repeat myself. And Conquest really scarred me because Conquest is the only one that does permadeath.
Yeah.
You can't do casual. And so that was rough. That was a rough game to beat. But I went through it. I managed it. And then I played Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valencia, which is the remake of the previous Fire Emblem game. Really good. I really enjoyed that one. That might be up there, like top 3 Fire Emblem games. And then, of course, Three Houses and Engage now. So, yeah,
Okay.
I've been playing at least every generation of Fire Emblem games since Fire Emblem Awakening.
Yeah.
I have not played the previous Fire Emblem games beforehand. So, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Nice.
Mhm.
Nice. As for me, I have a
Yeah.
similar story, but I actually started a little bit earlier because just like you, I also discovered, Marth and Roy through Super Smash Brothers Melee. But if you go into kind of the trophy descriptions in Super Smash Brothers Melee, they always because there's a bunch of characters in that you get trophies for that aren't even just playable characters. There's also non-playable characters, and they all have at least a little bit of information about their game listed there.
Mhm.
So that's where I found out that Marth and Roy were from games called Fire Emblem. And when I did kind of my research on the internet at the time, obviously those games did not exist here in North America, unfortunately. But around that time, we were getting the very first Fire Emblem games in North America, and the first one I actually played was Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones on the Game Boy Advance.
Right.
That was actually the second Fire Emblem release we got in North America. The first one was just called Fire Emblem, and it had, I think it was one of Roy's games. I still haven't played that one yet.
Me neither.
It's still sitting on my Wii U. I will play it eventually, but I have not played it yet.
The Wii U.
I mean,
what a treasure trove of like just everything.
But
every Nintendo game.
It was just so much cheaper to buy it there than buy the actual cartridge, though.
You're right. Like
it was $5.
Good for you, man.
Yeah.
Wii U is such like every time you say it, like I keep forgetting that there's DS and is there 3D? They're no 3DS.
No
but
3DS
DS,
games.
DSi, and GBA.
Yes, exactly. The worst part about it is that we had the sampling of Game Boy Advance games on 3DS with the Ambassador program, because we actually have Secret Stones if you were an Ambassador. But unfortunately they never, put out any other Game Boy Advance games on 3DS, which made me sad, because that would have been, because those games play great on 3DS. So I'm actually kind of sad that
they're fantastic on 3DS.
Yeah. So getting back to my story. So I played Secret Stones. I thought it was okay. I wasn't really super into it or anything like that. So, around the time when, Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn were coming out, I just didn't end up picking them up, even though I saw them on store shelves like a dummy, because I should have picked them up, because now I haven't played those games still, and they're super expensive now. Especially Path of Radiance. Path of Radiance in particular is like very, very, very expensive. So, at that point, I basically waited till the 3DS when Awakening came out. I remember being really excited for it because I was finally able to play it on 3DS, and it looked like the type of strategy RPG I would be really into, especially coming from a background of playing stuff like Shining Force or Disgaea and stuff like that. And I picked it up day one and really loved it. So much so that I then, heard my roommates were talking about it at the time. And they were all like, I got them into Fire Emblem as well. So like our entire
Nice.
house and that we were renting out and then everyone who came in it all became Fire Emblem people. Mainly because I picked up the game at launch and loved it. So, I think that was the one game that probably really got the most people into the series. And then with Fates, I actually played all 3 versions because I'm a crazy person. Don't do that. Honestly, you can just play Conquest and then
You play just Fate.
Well, Revelations, the 3rd chapter, is probably the best one. And it also is the one that ties up all the story ends, but I feel like it has less impact if you don't at least play Conquest or Birthright first. And I would say Conquest is way better than Birthright. So, that's probably the way to go if you actually wanted to go back and play Fates if you've never played it. And then Echoes, for whatever reason, I didn't play it, but I wasn't playing a lot of 3DS at the time when it came out. But of course now I have the collector's edition for it on my shelf. But I got that after the fact. I didn't get it right away or anything like that. So, I didn't actually end up playing it until much, much later. And like you, I really enjoyed that game a lot too. I think it's actually one of the more underrated Fire Emblem games. And then Three Houses came out. And I thought Three Houses was really good. I played all the Roots of Three Houses, but it also wasn't, the most mind-blowing experience or anything like that. Cause I just didn't like a lot of the teacher stuff or a lot of the school stuff that you did in that game. Like, it's just like, I get people really like the tea parties and stuff like that, but I was like, yeah, I don't really care about the tea parties. Yeah. Things like that. Like the optional activities, I just wasn't really into, which I think we'll play into a little bit of, when we talk about Engage here, but yeah. And then Engage, of course, the newest game out now.
The newest one. Yes.
I still need to go back and play some of the older Fire Emblem games though, because I do really want to. Like we had that re-release of the original Fire Emblem on NES that was translated. Right. I have it, but I haven't played it yet. And I really, I kind of want to at some point. And then I kind of want to wait for, Genealogy of the Holy War to eventually get a remake before maybe going back to that game rather than playing like a fan translated version or anything like that. But I kind of want to play those Super Nintendo Fire Emblem games at some point. Like, I want to give them a try.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely give them a try. I tried the Fire Emblem 30th anniversary or whatever, and after the first battle, I was like, you know what, I'm good.
Yeah.
Shining Force proved itself. It was probably the better end of the stick at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of rough going to those classic Fire Emblem games before the GBA.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, even then, like I still feel like Shining Force 2 is actually probably a much more approachable game than, the older Fire Emblem games, even just because of the permadeath element, let alone.
Yeah, the permadeath really kills you.
Yeah. Especially with the difficulty, because they're fairly difficult games as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, for sure.
But there you go. So that's our history with the series. In case you're new to the show, we wanted to make sure to throw that in here because it's been a year and a half since we did that episode, Garrett. So I thought it was time to talk about it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but we should talk about, of course, how we played the game, where we're at in Fire Emblem Engage, what difficulty we played on, stuff like that. So Garrett, I finished the game, but I know you haven't, right?
I have not. I wanted to so badly before this episode, but I have not.
Yeah.
Finished it. So
how far are you in the game, just approximately, just ballpark?
I'm chapter 15.
Okay.
So I'm getting there. It's like more than halfway.
Yeah.
So
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
You're definitely getting there. Whereas for me, I did finish the game like last weekend. I put 52 hours was my final playtime in order to finish it. I hear that
around the hour count is 45 to 50 hours.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
I also did a lot of idling too, and I did like way more skirmishes than I probably needed to, because I was grinding up some of my characters.
I love doing the skirmishes, man.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just, and I did every paralogue as well, including the DLC paralogues, which we'll actually talk about the DLC in a little bit, because I'm sure people out there who haven't played the DLC or haven't picked it up yet maybe want to know whether or not it's worth picking up the DLC right away or not, and I'll actually answer that question a little bit later as well. So then, Garrett, other question for you: what difficulty did you play on, and did you play with classic or casual?
I went normal and casual mode this time. I wasn't gonna scar myself again after my 3 houses run. So I did hard classic on three houses, and I did not. And I went through that run through without losing a single character, and I was very happy with it.
Mhm.
But it's like I was going through, I don't know, some dark times
Yeah.
during that game because it's so difficult to not lose a single character because these CPUs, man, they will target a character. They will target one character and
Yeah.
destroy them. So I'm glad I let myself go to casual mode and I never look back. I'm playing this game. I'm losing characters like once or twice left and right. I'm like, you know what? That's fine.
Yep.
I can keep going. And it's so great
Yeah.
having that weight off my shoulders.
No, I think you
What
made
about you?
the right call because I actually
Yeah.
also played normal and casual, especially because I knew we were going to review the game. So generally, whenever I approach a review on the channel, I always make it my priority to play the game on normal difficulty, regardless of how I feel about it personally, whether I want to play higher difficulty or not, because that'll be like the difficulty that most people will play at that I know that are probably listening. But not only that too, that's kind of how I usually play Fire Emblem because I'm usually fairly laid back with them. Because I like with Engage, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but I like, even though on normal difficulty, I like some of the challenges it throws at you, despite even if there is no permadeath, there is some challenge that's still there. So I'm actually like, I'm not looking for it to be brutally difficult. And the only reason why I play on casual instead of classic is just because I'm the type of person who will just restart an entire mission if anyone dies. So I'm just saving myself the trouble of doing that because then no one dies. Yes, it changes your tactics slightly because you can, throw people into impossible situations where they'll get targeted by the enemies. But I think that also plays into the strategy a little bit. So I can personally live with that. As opposed to I'm getting texts every day from my girlfriend Garret because she's also playing this game. She's playing on maddening difficulty on classic, and she's having a time with the game. She's on.
Lord bless her.
She's
God bless her.
She just finished chapter 7, and but it took her, I think, almost 50 tries to do chapter 5 without losing anybody.
Exactly. You can't put yourself through that, man. Like I went through that with three houses and never again. I'm just like, no, ripping the band-aid. I'm going normal casual, never look back. I am having a blast with this game.
To be fair,
Yes.
it also sounds like she's having a blast with the difficulty because she likes really punishing games, and she likes the competitive side of games as well. So I'm glad she's actually having a lot of fun with it. But I know it's just like when I hear her talk about it, I'm like, yep, that's not for me. Yeah, I'm good. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. Is kind of my response to that.
You know what? I do have to like if you guys have an itching. Just try it out. Just try it a little harder difficulty and try casual mode or classic mode, because it really is a different game.
Yeah.
Once you set that on, it's really like no more like giving away anything. You are so much more defensive.
Yeah.
Every space counts in that battlefield. Every space in every turn, and it's certainly an experience, but I'm glad I experienced it once, and I'm not going back again,
Well, apparently it totally messes with the hit rates for your allies. Like she was mentioning to me, there's like your allies have like a 95% chance to hit, and they miss almost every time. And I was just like, oh my god, that sounds miserable. But,
that sounds about right.
Yeah, but either way, at least we have the same baseline we're kind of comparing it from, which is nice. That we both kind of played through it the same way, which is good. But yeah, even if you played on normal mode, it's still a really long game at, again, like 50 hours, which is kind of crazy. So real quick, let's give kind of like a quick, spoilerish free kind of story synopsis to what you're kind of doing in this game, just so we can kind of talk about the story at least a little bit. But obviously we're going to, avoid any spoilers. So you play as Alir, or whatever you decide to rename your, crest kind of colored character. He or she is a divine dragon that's been asleep for 100 years. You wake up because evil is afoot, and you and your fellow guardians who have been guarding over your body for 100 years need to go across the land and collect the 12 emblem rings in order to basically save the day. And the emblem rings contain the spirits of warriors from other realms, aka other Fire Emblem games, because essentially this game serves as basically like a Fire Emblem like 30th anniversary celebration, where all the emblem rings, there's one emblem ring for each Fire Emblem game across the 12 games. Like that's how that works. And you know, as you recruit those characters, you'll then learn more about them, and they'll be integrated into the story in some interesting ways, which was kind of cool. And then from there, you can also spawn additional rings from the same game. So you get like a bunch of random characters from, you know, Genealogy of the Holy War, or like the original Shadow Dragon, or Sacred Stones to kind of use in your party as well, which are like weaker versions of the same rings. And we'll talk more about how the rings kind of work when we get into combat mechanics. So Garrett, that's enough about what I want to say about the actual story itself, but I want to know what your thoughts are on the story in Engage. Like, do you like it? Do you not like it? What do you think about it so far?
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's like, oh, I'm going through a JRPG story, numero 27. It is definitely like on that JRPG trope storyline, the writing to the voice acting. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm
Yeah.
just saying like once you play like one JRPG, you kind of know what is going on with this game. So it's pretty predictable. Then again, I'm only in chapter 15, so who knows? Maybe it'll surprise me at the end, like what Pokemon did earlier, like this past month or past few months.
Yeah.
But you know, like from what I'm seeing, I don't really care much about the story. That's not the highlight of the game for me. I like the character design a
Yeah.
lot. I love the different characters and the personalities behind it. I think they did a very great job of like putting in different costume designs, different personalities behind them. Um, Overall, it's just fine. It's a fine JRPG story. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Honestly, I think, you know, Fire Emblem to me has never been like, and I think I know people feel differently about this, but for me,
Yeah.
I've never really thought of Fire Emblem as a series that have had amazing stories. I think the stories always
Yeah.
have been pretty good, but I've never really thought of Fire Emblem stories as amazing or the main reason why I'm playing these games. A lot of times the main reason I'm
Exactly.
playing Fire Emblem is for the combat. In the same reason why I really like Shining Force on the Genesis. I really like the story is just okay in those games, but the main reason why you're playing it is the gameplay, and I
Yes.
really felt that way about this game. But I will say the storyline in this one overall, I feel like it's a little bit worse than some, like it's a little more generic than some of the other games.
It's pretty generic,
Yeah.
man. Like you go through the next chapter and I'm like, okay, we're doing this.
Yeah.
We're being predictable about this. Like
Yeah.
it's going through the campy stuff.
Yeah.
It's very noticeable.
Don't get me wrong. I think there are some good like twists in the story, and I think there's some good story
Yeah.
moments. But I just think
Hmm.
overall, it definitely feels more on the generic side than a lot of the other games, and that's okay. Because again, I
Okay.
think that this game gets lifted up a lot by its gameplay, which again we'll kind of dive into a little bit. But also, I agree with you with the character designs, Garrett, because I think you could definitely tell that a different team than usual designed the characters this time around. Because you can tell that Gust had a little influence on this game this time around, which is good.
Hmm.
Like I actually felt like the character designs were actually pretty refreshing, both from a visual standpoint, but even just the interactions with the characters. I really like. Like I liked all of the all of the interactions between the characters when you go back to like when you're leveling up your bonds and whatnot with your other characters. I liked all that stuff in this game. So I do
It's
think some of
interesting.
that stuff's really good. So yeah,
Oh my gosh, the bonding. There's some conversations between two characters. I'm like, I know they're being like trying to be wacky, and
yeah,
but it's just like with the translation, with the voice acting, and I'm just like,
yeah,
wow, they you can tell how campy this game is. They I think it was more self-aware than anything else. It wasn't meant to be, you know, super serious or whatever. And that's kind of like the very different from Three Houses, you know? Three Houses was totally like very serious, very dark.
Yeah.
Player agency and choice that really impacted the story and it really impacted which characters you're gonna have or not, and it was emotional.
Yeah.
And even towards the end, it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is grim. But this one, not so much. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, let's all be cute and have fun.
Yeah.
That's what I feel
No,
like.
exactly. Like
This
this is a
story.
very kind of like happy-go-lucky kind of story that also happens to be, generic, RPG storyline 82 where your character has amnesia and you've got to save the world with your plucky group of friends. Like that is kind of a big part of, the story in this game, which is fine. Again, there's nothing wrong with that as long as again, it's not taking itself too seriously. And I don't think that this game definitely does that. But moving on from the story, but obviously I will say, if you're going into this, if you haven't picked up Engage yet and you want to know if there's a good story there, don't play this game for the story. I think there's more to it than that because
Exactly.
we got to talk about the combat, Garrett, the mechanics, because there's a bunch of interesting mechanics in this game that I want us to talk about. So first off, the weapon triangle, Garrett, is back in this game.
It is back.
It's back,
Thank goodness.
but in a different way than before because it's not just based on damage this time around as far as doing additional damage. Like if you have like an axe versus a sword as an example, like it's not just about extra damage, but it's all about being able to break or quote unquote break the enemy that you're attacking, which actually stops them from counterattacking you, which is a big part of planning out your strategy and knowing, okay, which guys you want to go in with. But I did notice as part of the weapon triangle being back, the team mechanics, I felt like got it like a big debuff in combat this time around. Where in Awakening, if you had, three characters next to each other, and they all had like really high bond levels with each other, like you would attack and you would basically get three full attacks on the enemy.
It'd be crazy.
Yeah. Whereas in this game, like you're basically attacking for 5 if you've got an ally that's by you, and that scales up, depending on your support level, where the maximum they can attack for is 15 essentially at that point.
And it's not much. It's like less than half or even a fourth of the damage that you would see in Awakening.
Yeah, because you'll go up against bosses that'll have 60 health with 2 revive gems, meaning they basically have 180 health, and your team attacks are attacking for 10. And so it's just like, they definitely nerfed that a lot. But what did you think about the weapon triangle being back and how that worked into the strategy? Because I thought the braking system was actually kind of interesting this time.
The braking system is cool. I think it adds a little bit more kind of flavor to the battlefield for both you and the enemy. Like it really doesn't matter. Like, and you got to make sure that the sequence of your attacks is what's really critical when you're going through this weapon triangle stuff, because you want to make sure you go in and break the character or whatever, and that means they can't attack in the next turn. So you can use that to your advantage for your next attack, being whatever it is. It doesn't matter which character is going to be. They're not going to attack back to that character. So that's great. But the same thing happens the other way around. The enemy can do that as well. So you just got to, take it for what it is. But yeah, I like how that's in. I like the light little changes to the combat compared to previous games, because they wanted to do something just a little bit different. With Fates, it was all in Awakening, it was all about the dating simulation or whatever, and figuring out which kids to have or not. Three Houses was just more about like which students to have or whatever, and then it adds a little bit more combat to the monsters or whatever. But this time around, going back to the classic Fire Emblem style a little bit more, and now putting this extra flavor of breaking. So I think it's kind of cool. The way that they're just kind of mixing the pot a little bit, but not too much. It's still classic Fire Emblem, I think.
Yeah.
From a battle standpoint.
I think so. Yeah, for the most part, like I actually felt like this one almost was a return to form with the combat itself, because I felt like Three Houses, especially with some of the garrison units you'd have, and Just some of
Yeah.
the way those battles were designed, it really felt like they were kind of getting away from traditional Fire Emblem and trying
Very
to
different.
do something kind of different, which is okay. Like I did like the battles in Three Houses, and I liked that for that game they did something different. But I'm glad with this one because again, it's trying to be like an anniversary project for Fire Emblem. So looking at it from that perspective, it makes sense that why they would go back to more of a classic style combat versus something like Three Houses, I think, in a
Yeah.
big way, which I think is a good thing. But of course, with every Fire Emblem game, you get a little gimmick thrown in with each game, and this one is engaging. And we talked about it before. Engaging is where you wear a ring from one of the 12 other characters from previous Fire Emblem games, and they will help you during combat. Usually you can do a big super attack depending on the character itself. And what's nice about the super attack is not only does it do a lot of damage, but the enemy cannot counterattack you during the super attack.
Yeah.
So you kind of get like a free pass. So it's usually strategic to use that ability when maybe your character is low on life, or when you're maybe anticipating that the enemy that you're attacking is going to kill your unit or might seriously wound them. It might be better to use that versus there. And you can't use it unlimited times. You can only use the super ability when you engage. But then you can just use regular attacks until the engage wears off after a couple turns, and then you have to wait a certain number of turns before that replenishes before you can use it again. So again, it's really tactical when you're going to employ that. Although I will say, for me personally, just playing on normal towards the end of the game, I really found like I was only really using the engage ability like just as soon as like basically to dogpile the boss essentially. Which is just funny. Like gathering all my allies around the boss and then having them all engage kind of at the same time, and then just kind of like obliterating the final boss from there. But not
That
all.
sounds about right.
Yeah, but the super attacks aren't just all damage abilities, because there is a heal ability as well that's like super powerful that you get as well, which actually heals all your allies to full, but then your character that uses it then goes back to down to 1 health. So then you have to try and, balance that out a little bit. But then you also have access to the hero's weapon. And depending on your bond with that hero, you'll have access to one of 3 weapons that then vary in power, that you can actually power back up in your main base. So again, lots of layers with engaging. But Garrett, you facepalmed a little bit when I mentioned engaging. But I want to know what you think about this.
Well, I thought you were gonna mention another thing, so we're good. Engage, I think is cool. I think it has they wanted to do something different, and I'm glad that they did this with their anniversary celebration. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, let's call back to these heroes, and it really reminds me of like Persona.
Yeah.
Like, you're calling a ghostly figure that has enhanced powers for you. What I'm noticing more and more with the Engage, I love how powerful it is, but at the same time how limited it can be.
Yeah.
Because you got a gauge, and then in the beginning of the battle, that gauge is full, so you can use the engage whenever you want. But once you run out of that engage ability, you have to attack with that character a certain amount of times, or go to certain spots in the map to fully recharge the gauge.
Yeah.
So there's some limitations of using it. You got to be using it wisely throughout the game. As you said, the super abilities in the engage has a lot of different flavors to it for sure. As you said, there's one that does healing. There's one that like is kind of like a biting attack where like every enemy can attack that one character and it's taking all the damage, and then does a super powerful attack at the next turn against all the enemies. So there's just a lot of different kind of flavors with it. There's one that like is a bow that shoots super far,
Yeah.
like super duper far. It's like so nice. It's
Yeah.
like, oh great, I can pick off one character that would super annoy me if I ever come in contact with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, the engaging stuff is cool. And I love how the weapons you get access to during engage is focused on the weapon. So it's not because classes, right? You're for the character that you have, the classes have specific weapons that you can only wield.
Yeah.
But once you're engaged to one of the Fire Emblem characters, then you get focused on their specialized weapons, whether it's a hammer or a bow or whatever. So you can instantly switch weapons
Yeah.
in the game, and it kind of this game wants you to mix and match,
Yeah.
and so you can like pick whatever emblem rings you want to whatever character you want in your party. Like it doesn't matter. And it's so nice that the game offers you an optimize button for these rings as well. And so you can just press L, optimize all. Great. You picked out the most, according to the game, the most optimized way for your rings and for your emblem rings. And I think it's kind of cool to play it like that as well. And then you get more bond levels between your emblem and the character itself. So uh, as you raise that bond level, you'll get more skills unlocked to inherit, and then so on and so forth. I think it's cool, and it's a great extra mechanic that we haven't seen before in in Fire Emblem games, and I'm wondering if they'll ever do it again.
Yeah. I would imagine, because
yeah.
just like a lot of the one-off mechanics, it probably won't be something we see in another game. Kind of like the dragon abilities in, Fates, or some of
Right.
the other abilities you got in Awakening. Like, I don't think they're going to redo that again, which sucks, because I actually like the Engage stuff a lot. I like the emblems. I think I like the idea there.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea. And also I like the customization that you can also do with your characters, because then you can inherit skills from the bonds that you have with your emblems to give you some of your characters, access to some skills from there that are actually like really useful. Like one of them, for example, Sigurd, which is like a mountain unit. In his original game, he could, move after he attacks. And you can actually get that skill for any of your teammates that you then level up your bond with him to level 5. And then you spend what's referred to as SP, or skill points, to then obtain that when you go back to your home base. So I love just the extra layer of strategy that's in there as to like, okay, what skills are useful to target for specific characters, or which ones do you want to target for every character? Because there are some abilities like the one I just mentioned for Sigurd that you kind of want with every character for the most part. Like, because that extra ability to move after combat is just so useful in getting out of danger. Like it makes a lot of sense, especially I imagine like in the tougher difficulties. Like if you're playing on Maddening, like that sounds like something you want with every one of your Gadoos.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
To have that, yeah.
So yeah, I like how all that stuff kind of ties together, and how all that works, and that plays a little bit into the DLC emblems, which I'll actually talk about now. So first off, we do have a DLC pack that's available now. That basically has 4 different DLC releases, and we only have one of them so far. And each one is going to have a certain number of emblem rings in it from characters from other games that we don't know who they're going to include just yet. All we'd have right now are you receive an emblem ring with the 3 house leaders from 3 houses, and you also you have like this really overpowered engage attack with them, where you attack with all 3 of their weapons, and it looks really cool. That emblem in particular has a very powerful ability which gives you 20% experience bonus that you can then tie to any one of your troops, provided that they unlock that ability. So that's So that's one that if you really want to skip the grinding, that's actually a good character to have from the DLC. And then the other one that you get is Tiki, and you actually have a mission where you unlock Tiki, which is really cool. Like I really like the mission that you have with Tiki. It's in this like ice palace, and I like the mechanics that they're in there and stuff, and it kind of is very Tiki flavored. So I kind of like the idea that they kind of went all out with the paralog for Tiki. But her special ability, one of the ones that you can target for your other troops, is that when they level up, they get like a higher % chance to get a ton of bonus stats, or to increase your power level really rapidly. So that was another good one to really target for your skill points if you do have the DLC. Not only that, but Tiki is ridiculous when you transform into her, because you transform into a dragon, because of course you do, it's Tiki. And you have 3 engage abilities. Because you have like this breath attack, which then hits 4 units kind of in like a T shape. And then you have like a kick that's good against certain units, and then a claw that's better against a different type of units. So the DLC characters are interesting to have. It's probably not worth it to get the DLC now unless you're gonna want to go back for that extra episode, because that's gonna be where the bulk of the DLC will be later down the line at some point. But I wanted to touch on it there because I know probably some people at home are wondering if the DLC is probably worth it. So it's probably not worth it right at this second, unless you want those extra 2 rings to work with. But I think eventually it probably will be with the extra content at some point.
Yeah. So do you think it's gonna be as big as like Fire Emblem Three Houses DLC, right? The Cinder Shadows or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I imagine it would be a similar length where it'll be an entire. Well, it made sense in Three Houses because Three Houses had multiple routes, and it was basically just the 5th route essentially. So they probably won't do something similar this time, but I think it'll be at least a 20 to 30 hour story, I imagine, at some point.
Wow. Yeah, that's gonna be pretty big. So
Yeah, they haven't
I'm
talked
looking
about it
forward
too
to
much,
it.
but yeah, they said there's gonna be a lot there. But also, again, the Divine Paralog Island, which is the DLC island that unlocks when you get the DLC, it has at least 9 more missions as paralogs for recruiting the other rings, so that are going to pop in as DLC later. So you already have that on top of whatever this next chapter DLC is going to be. So that might also be another, so that's maybe 10 to 20 hours just to do the paralogs that are there. And then you get another 20 or 30 hours on top of that with whatever this new episode or chapter or whatever it is going to be. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I think it's actually really interesting. So that's the DLC anyways. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about combat. We should talk a little bit about the Somniel though, which is the home base that you go to between missions. You're shaking your head because I think this is more of a throwaway thing this time around. And I kind of like that about that though, where I like that there's a lot of activities there, but a lot of them are throwaway activities where if they're optional. You don't have to do them if you don't want to do them.
That's true. You don't have to do
There's a couple that you should do after every single battle, because it actually, unlike Three Houses, where you basically go there on whenever the calendar dictates you go back to the home base, in this game, you can go back to the home base whenever you want to, and it refreshes after every single battle you do, even skirmishes. The one area that's really useful in there is the arena, where essentially you get 3 free battles with any one of your party members to then get extra XP. And usually for a lot of characters, that will be a single level if you do all 3 of them with one character.
Yeah, it's pretty useful like that, especially for weaker characters in your party that you want to level up.
But
it's a good way to level up.
But they get paired against characters in your party or your emblems, and they have to win the battle to get the maximum amount of experience. So you do have to keep that in mind a little bit. And it's random too. So you can't purposely make it to have them fight one of your level 1 characters that you haven't even touched in your party, as an example.
I've touched all my characters.
Oh, geez. Oh, that sounds wrong, Garrett. Why were you saying that?
What I mean by that, they're all pretty good levels right now. Yeah. I don't leave anyone behind. No,
of course. But you have this little farm where you can adopt animals after every battle, because after every battle you can actually walk around the map that you fought on in 3D, which I think is interesting. I like the idea of being able to run around the map a little bit and explore. But you can adopt these little animals, and then when you adopt them, you bring them back to your home base. And they will, after every mission, give you more resources that you can then use for either upgrading your weapons or eating with your cafeteria with your friends to then boost your bond levels, or certain aspects like that. But for the most part, again, I really think a lot of that stuff is totally optional. If you don't really want to engage, of course, just to use the word there, if you don't want to engage with the system there, I don't really think you have to at that point.
Yeah, so the most required things from this island, I think, is, as you said, the arena is a big one. The farm is good to have just because you want to get some of those cooking ingredients for cooking, and cooking is pretty important in this game as well. I think it's less important than Three Houses, but still pretty important, where you prep a meal with you, the main character, Lear, whatever, and your two other characters of your choice.
Yeah.
And then you want to maximize or the best meal out of them so you can get as much support and bonding between the characters so you can go to the next support level for all of them. So yeah, that's why you kind of need cooking ingredients. That's why fishing is involved too. Fishing isn't that bad in this game. I like it's like
Yeah.
okay, you go and do the mini game and you're good. Um, I think the rings is fine. I'm mid about this whole melding rings, the side rings.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned before, these emblem rings are coming from every game. And so what they did is like, okay, you can buy like with your bond fragments a certain amount of random rings coming from their game, all the different characters, but they don't give you these special abilities or whatever. They just give you extra stats, which is
Yeah.
fine. Um, it just seems like a little bit more busy work than anything.
Yeah.
It's cool to see all the different designs coming from all the games going into this one. It's just all the 2D artwork, and it's actually straight from like
Yeah.
it's straight from the games. Like you see Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valencia. I was surprised to see all the 2D art coming from the 3DS game.
Yeah.
It's like straight up the same design.
Well, they do that with
Uh,
because you would also get the Awakening or the Fates characters as well.
yeah,
When you unlock those emblems as well, and there's again same thing. But then also you get the like the Shadow Dragon ones, and they're all like the old character portraits from the NES game or the GBA remake
right,
of it, which is just funny to
right.
see.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you could do the bonding, the polishing ring stuff. Is that's a throwaway,
Yeah.
kind of. And then the exercising and the shooting,
Yeah.
with the wyvern riding. That's all throwaways, really.
Yeah.
You don't
Same
need
with
to
the
do
fishing
that.
as well. It's kind of throwaway
The
because
fishing you don't really need to do. Yeah.
yeah. Again, I like that stuff's there for that people who actually like to do a lot of that stuff or like to go back to the home base and try a bunch of different things. But again, it doesn't. I don't feel like I'm missing anything by not doing any of that stuff because I was doing all that
I
stuff at first, and then I realized, no, I don't really need to do all these things. But it was good to at least try all of them out and see what they offered, anyways.
Yeah, the one thing I always need to do when I go back to this stupid island is to pick up all the items.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, that's a flashing yellow on my mini map. I better go get it. And I cannot miss this opportunity to pick up that one thing on
Yep.
the ground. And then I gotta pet Sami and let him poop out fragments because
Yep.
that's a great mechanic to have around.
Yep.
Um, Anyways, yeah, it's fine. It's a fine island. I still say Fates has the best kind of headquarters
Yeah.
type of mechanics than any other Fire Emblem game that
Yeah.
I've played
Yeah, I
personally.
like the base building in Fates and the fact that you could also attack other bases as well in the multiplayer and take the bases out. Which, by the way, I don't think either of us tried the multiplayer for this one, right?
No, I have not.
Yeah,
No,
I
no.
didn't either. I don't even know what you really do. You just go to the tower because there's the Tower of Trials and there's multiplayer stuff
Yeah.
there where you can do like quick matches against other people. So I haven't really done that at all. But that's a thing. That's a thing that you can do in that game as well. So,
Hmm.
kind of skipping over some of those other stuff. First of all, I'm glad that skirmishes are back in this game,
Me too.
as well as the paralogs, which have been kind of in all the newer Fire Emblem games, and I think all of them are pretty well done as well. But I noticed that there are definitely less paralogs this time around than a lot of the other games. But I
Yeah.
still like that there's plenty of skirmishes if you need to grind XP for whatever reason if you're having trouble. I like that that's there, even though it does take a little while before you get to unlock skirmishes as a mechanic. I
Yeah.
do like that they're in this game as well. Um,
Yeah, skirmishes are fine. I didn't understand too much of the level scaling as much. Like they were trying to tell you, hey, you got to be base class this or advanced class that. And it seems always the skirmishes were higher level than my chapters, and
yeah,
that just made
every
okay,
time.
okay, that's intended. Okay, cool. Sounds good. But I always felt like going into a battle, and this is just me, and this is on normal casual as well, so don't take it with a grain of salt. I did not have trouble.
Yeah,
This is not There's not too much of a struggle for me. I would lose a character here and there if it's super hard, but I never felt like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose this game.
Yeah.
Um, every time. So yeah, but
Yeah.
that's just me.
The funny thing is, Garrett, towards the end of the game, you will unlock skirmishes that are base class 5 and stuff like that, like really weak
Weird.
skirmishes, to then bring up your lower level characters that maybe you haven't touched.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you do
Cool.
get that eventually. Just for whatever reason, it doesn't happen until like the last like 5 or 6 chapters of the game for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. Also, I know there's actually a lot of people that are out there asking this question because it's not spelled out for you. Yes, there is romance in this game, but it happens way later in this game than every other Fire Emblem game. So the game will introduce you to that element. It's interesting how they do romances this year, and I don't want to spoil it because there is a story specific reason why it's later in the game. But just so you know, for those that are playing this game along with us, that are wondering where the romance stuff is, why you don't get S rank with your characters to then romance them, that's why. There is a section later in the game where you then get to do the romance stuff. But it is not, the game unfortunately does not spell it out for you, which is just bizarre. Okay. But
yeah, they never, I haven't touched it yet.
Yeah.
I hear it's like way later.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Way later. Good. Yeah. And the last thing I want to kind of mention before we go to final thoughts are the visuals, because I thought that this is always an interesting topic when we're talking about Switch games in 2023, Garrett, because everyone's always like, man, things barely run on the Switch. I can't believe that we need to move on from this platform. But this, I think, is actually one of the examples of a game that actually runs really well on Switch. Like, this is a game that, it doesn't run these 60 frames per second or anything like that. It runs 30 frames per second, but a rock solid 30 frames per second pretty much throughout my entire experience. Unless you found it differently, Garrett. Did you have to slow down?
For 85% of the time, rock solid 30 FPS. There's 15%, and that's just not, like, it's not bad. It's just chugging because there's just a lot going on in the map. I'm like, okay, it's chugging down. Now it's dropping to 15 frames in this one certain frame of your game that's animating all these different characters. So, but yeah, all in all, not bad looking game at all on the Switch. It looks fantastic. The animations look great. It does look a little edgy, but not near as edgy as Fire Emblem Three Houses. This is like way smoother, way cooler looking, very vibrant on the Switch OLED. Like, I love playing this game on my OLED screen all the time. This game is like probably top 5 performing Nintendo first party games.
Yeah,
like I can think,
which says a lot because there's been a lot of games that have performed pretty well, but there's also a lot of games that just have not performed well on Switch. Yeah, especially as of late. So I definitely wanted to mention it there because, again, I remember during Nintendo Drive we got that question a lot, asking about performance. So I wanted to mention it here as well. But other than that,
it performs great.
Yeah.
So go for it.
Exactly. So now I think it's time for us to kind of go into our final thoughts and do we recommend this game. But before this, actually, I think maybe we'll do the listener questions actually first because maybe that'll tie into this a little bit. So first off, we should get into this first. But the Muffin Mon asked the question, who is the best waifu and why is it a T? Or a tie?
Who's a T? Oh,
she's the archer.
I dropped her. Sorry.
What?
Muffin Mon.
Oh my God.
Drop her. There's so many good characters. Okay. I do want to mention one not negative thing because they've always been doing this in Fire Emblem, but I have to complain about this.
Okay.
There's so many characters in this game. I'm one of those people, one of those players that loves to make sure everyone's involved, like in one way or another. So I'm a stickler. Like I will do I literally do skirmishes and paralogs, completely different characters, and just to make sure that they're leveled up, that they're doing fine, that they're having the best weapons, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of characters in this game.
Yeah.
And every chapter, I'm struggling to pick units because like okay, I need a good balance. Oh, but I really want this bond to go with this character, like this emblem ring to go with this character, so I gotta put that. But I need this character because it's lower. Like I have that going through my head every time. Like I think at least for like 20 minutes or 15 minutes, I'm thinking about who am I gonna put in this battlefield before I start. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that
Of course.
first.
So now
Um,
you have to answer the Muffin Mon's question. Who is the best waifu and why, Garrett?
it's not a T, of course. It's Ivy. Ivy
Oh,
is the best waifu. Like she is amazing. She is on a wyvern doing some cool magic. I just advanced her class and yeah, no, she's a looker too, for
yeah.
sure.
There's that.
Out of all of them.
There's an
Yes.
obvious reason why you might. I can understand why you would go with Ivy,
That
but
thirst trap
I just
from
really
the
like
game.
her character because I like
Yeah.
the bonds that you have with her, like when the conversations you have with her, like the sport conversations, are really good with Ivy, and I kind of like her story just in general. So I think
Hmm.
Ivy's a good answer, and I like it that Lasala in the chat also feel like you have a decent answer, even though I know Lasala's favorite character is Atia, and you kind of disappointed her a little bit, I think.
Yes.
As from me, I would actually say my favorite waifu, the best waifu in this
Yes.
game, is Chloe, because she
Oh,
just
it's
wants
good.
to live in like a fairy tale story. She's got great goals. She's got blue hair, which always great. I really like the hair that she has. She's of course a Pegasus rider, which also I think is a good look as well. So I have to go with her. I think she's great. But then Sean Capri, the pants man himself, asks follow-up question of the highest journalistic interest: who is the best husbando, and why is it literally? Well, I literally don't know who to put there. Nagachaka, what do I do? So, who is the best husbando in this game, and why, Garrett?
There's only one husbando in this entire character palette. Or actually, there's two.
Okay.
Um, One is Pandreo.
Mm-hmm.
Pandreo's there, man. He's like the party animal. He loves to. Have you heard the support conversations with Pandreo? The guy, he's the high priest from Psalm,
Right.
the red hair. Yeah. He has a wacky personality. I love it. He's just all over the place. My next one is Fogado. Fogato's legit too. He's certainly a character as well. So those are my two husbandos.
Nice. Nice. Those are some good choices. Um, yeah, it's a tough one. I honestly would probably say Pendrago too. That's probably who I would say.
And
Yeah,
Pandreo, yeah.
Pendrago. Yeah, that's who I would say. We're just
Oh.
gonna stick with them. Oh my god, that's so ridiculous, but you love it. It's so good. And
You
then
know, it's so funny because the character animation has nothing to do with the voice acting. The animations like this, like he's just like steadily going back and just opening his mouth a little bit, not like anything, but he literally does a wolf sound, like a wolf
right,
howl, like the loudest he can. This voice actor was really into it,
yeah,
so I applaud him for that.
you did a good job. Next, we got Skycatcher Gaming, who asks, "Do you feel that Engage gives too many difficulty options? Is Engage good enough for another playthrough?" So it has 3 difficulty options. You have normal, you have hard, and then you
Mhm.
have maddening, which I think is fine. I don't think you really need more than that. I
Mhm.
would say what I would love in the future instead is maybe to have like a dynamic difficulty system where maybe those are like presets, but maybe there's a bunch of bars that you can slide depending on different mechanics. Maybe you want increased or decreased. So if there's maybe one mechanic you're really struggling with, you can maybe pull that down, but then kind of raise other levels of stuff. But I know that that's a lot of complication to add to the game design, so I can understand why they don't do that and why they just default to 3 different difficulties. But I don't think it has too many difficulty options. But what do you think about this question, Garrett?
I don't think it has too many. It's fine. It's three. I mean, it's three difficulty options. You see games with like seven or
Yeah,
something like that.
that's true.
Um, I think you're right. I think Wargroove did it pretty well. They have like scalars for each of their difficulty options.
Yeah.
I would like to see, as you said, have a dynamic system, but at the same time have presets. So like just have a button that says normal, hard, maddening,
Yeah.
and then you can click that, or you can just change however you want and do a custom
Yeah.
type of deal. I think I mean, that would be the best. Um, yeah, I think it's fine. It's pretty hard. I'm maddening in classic is like you don't want to go harder than that.
Yeah.
And normal casual is fine. I I think I think it's okay for this game. Um, I don't know if I would say this game is the most approachable Fire
Yeah.
Emblem game,
I think it's
though.
definitely one of them. I think of all the
Okay,
Fire Emblem
okay.
games, it's definitely one of the most approachable ones.
You think is the more okay, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's more approachable
Um,
than something like Fates. I think, except for Birthright, which
yeah,
was just
okay.
way too easy, or even something like I think like Fire Emblem Echoes. Like I think it's way more approachable than that.
For
I think it's
sure.
actually more approachable than Three Houses only because it's less bloated with mechanics, where it
It
actually is
is
just
less loaded, for
yeah.
sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like for new
And
players, they'd be able to get a handle on this better than something
it's
like Three
it's
Houses.
it is simpler
Yeah,
for sure than Three Houses. Yeah. I'm just still yeah. I'm wondering if there should have been an easier difficulty than this.
yeah,
Because we're both playing on the easiest difficulty we can be,
right.
right? Imagine someone that has never played a tactical RPG. It's like, all right, this is gonna be my first tactical RPG, and it's like,
Yeah,
well, I don't know. Like, I would try some other game out other than this one first.
yeah.
That's just me
It
though.
does hold your hand for the first couple chapters, though. Like that's one of I think that
Mhm.
its tutorial is lengthy and it teaches you a lot of the
It is.
mechanics. So I do think for someone who's new, they would be able to learn a lot of the mechanics pretty easily. Which is why I actually think between this or Awakening, those are probably the two. These are probably the two games I would say are probably like the most approachable for new players.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
but to Skycatcher's other question, is Engage good enough for another playthrough? I think it certainly is, but it's the type of thing where you're not really going back to do a different route like Three Houses or anything like
Yeah.
that. It is more like, Fates or Awakening. So you are kind of just playing the same story again if you want to replay it, but you maybe want to try it on a different difficulty or something along those lines. In which case, I think it's totally a serviceable way of, you know, I think it's totally fine to replay this game. But I don't think it adds I don't think the replay value as good as Three Houses, but I also think that might be for the better because in order to get the full story of Three Houses, you had to beat that game 4 times. It's like 200 hours to do all that. Like not everyone has 200 hours to then do that. So it's just like how many people are even really taking the time to see the rest of your game then at that point. Versus
Good.
yeah, versus something like this where everyone who beats it is going to see probably everything they need to see from this game unless they don't do some of the side missions or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. All right, but let's move to final thoughts. There are a couple other questions, but they're Fire Emblem adjacent questions, and we'll get to those in a second. So, final thoughts, Garrett. I want to know, even
Yes.
though you haven't finished it, do you think people should
Yes.
be checking out this game? Yay or nay? Because again, review scores were all over the place for this one. If you remember,
It
we had
was.
review scores in the 60s, review scores in the 90s. But what do you think about this one? Do you think people should check this one out?
People should definitely check this one out. I think I agree with you that, going into this game, you're gonna learn a lot about Fire Emblem, most than any other Fire Emblem game, just because of the classic characters that you're gonna meet along the way. I think it's a pretty simple, campy story, which is fine. It's serviceable. You don't need a very complicated story. The combat of it in itself, I think, is not. I've never struggled
Yeah.
in this one compared to previous one. I know a lot of people were initially playing on maddening,
Yeah.
and then they slowly dropped down to normal
Yeah.
because of the difficulty spike. But on normal and casual, I've never had an issue with any of the battles itself. Um, if you are into Fire Emblem, this is a must play. Like I don't know what you're doing. Like you're a Fire Emblem fan, you're playing this game, and no question, this is required reading for you folks out there. For non-Fire Emblem fans, if you're a tactical role-playing game and you're just like, hey, I want to try out a Fire Emblem game, this could be a good entryway for you. But if you are not a tactical RPG fan, let's say you're more into turn-based Persona type of gameplay, maybe Three Houses is a better fit for you just because of the character system, the player agency. It has a little bit more mechanics than just the Fire Emblem mechanics in there. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend it to
Yeah.
most of the people out there. It's a good game. It's a very good game. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, no, you made a lot of great points. I actually think this is, after I finished it, even though the story is just, okay, that's my least favorite thing about this game, because everything else I really enjoyed. Like, I didn't just play 50 hours of this game in 10 days by accident or because I felt like I had to. It's because I couldn't put this game down. I was so drawn in by Engage. I was fully engaged with Fire Emblem Engage, Garrett. And
Yes, you were.
I just couldn't stop playing it. So I just really, really enjoyed my time with this game. And I definitely think it is worth checking out as well. Yes, you're absolutely right. If you are if you did like a lot of the Persona-like elements from Three Houses, then you're definitely not going to like this game probably as much. And that's okay. It's just a very different style of game. But if you're into really deep strategy role-playing games and you like that combat, but also having it be pretty approachable, then I think, Engage is going to be your jam. And I definitely think it's worth checking out as well. So I think we both recommend you check out Engage, we recommend you engage with Engage. I think it'll be great.
Yes. Also, one more thing before we finish the Engage discussion, let's talk about this.
Okay.
Divine Edition that we both got.
Yes. Mine's
let me
across
grab
the
it
room.
real quick.
Oh, geez. Garrett's going to show it off, I guess. Because we both got the Divine Edition. In fact, you talk while I get mine.
It's beautiful. I love the cover art of this Divine Edition. It's not that much more between the game and this edition itself. So it includes a steelbook, which looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
You should absolutely get that. An art book, some art cards, and then a poster of this design itself up in the front.
Yeah.
It's one of the best looking posters I've seen from a Fire Emblem game.
Yeah.
So go check this one out. It's mostly available in stores. Like, I always see it available. So,
which is nice because like the other Fire Emblem collector's editions, they never ever made enough of them. So it was good. I'm glad that they made way more of these, I think. But
yes.
This special edition is actually really nice. And it kind of fits on my shelf with my other Nintendo special edition boxes anyways, where the boxes are all like a very similar box and stuff like that. And I like too that it's the logo here on the front is raised as well. I think that's a nice touch. So yeah, I'm so glad that I also, engage with the special edition of Fire Emblem Engage as well. How many times are we to say Engage on here? Oh, I can't see. Ask the question. This is a good one. Because I don't think either of us tried this out. Amiibo support. So there's an area in the Somniel called the Amiibo Gazebo, which I can't believe they didn't use for any other game out there. Like, this is the first time they've used the term Amiibo Gazebo, which just rolls off the tongue. So yes, it has Amiibo support. I think it just unlocks special items if you have some of the other Fire Emblem characters. Because it doesn't unlock any extra emblems or anything like that, I don't think. But again, I don't think either of us tried it, right, Garrett? Because I didn't try the amiibo support.
I think it's just extra items, right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. Yeah. And that's the same thing for Three Houses too. It's yeah. So
yeah, it's nothing too crazy.
I haven't tried it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just unfortunately don't have any of my Fire Emblem amiibo at the moment because they're all in a box in my mom's basement. Here
we go. So you can select and scan, place an amiibo on your controller. This will grant you a fashion and music ticket, which can be used to purchase amiibo exclusive outfits. So there's exclusive cosmetic items, exclusive on certain Fire Emblem amiibo. So you do have them. Go check that out. Go to the Amiibo Gazebo and put those amiibos on those controllers.
Yeah. But those cosmetics are specifically for the hub area that you're in and not for battle, which makes me sad.
It's not for battle, which is so weird, but whatever.
It's fine because the very first thing I did, Garrett, was unlock all the swimsuits and then just went with that. There you go.
Yes, of course.
All the characters in my party have swimsuits, because why not? But anyways, let's get into some of the other questions here. We got 3 other like rudimentary questions here. But they're all Fire Emblem adjacent, so none of them are like, different types of questions. So we're going to start with Rybo, aka Ribble, on the Discordia, who asked the questions: can we engage in banning McBeal? All right, the real question then: is there a Fire Emblem game that is worth tracking down to have in one's collection? So here's the thing. It depends. You could approach this a couple of different ways. Because, I mean, he's probably not asking what the best Fire Emblem game to play is. He's probably asking, like, what's the best collectible Fire Emblem game? In which case, we already answered to that earlier. It's Fire Emblem Path of Radiance on the GameCube.
It's Path of Radiance. That thing is a rarity.
Yeah.
Out in the wild.
I mean, it's already one of the rarest games on probably the console that is in the most demand at the current moment.
Yeah.
Like that, Path of Radiance is worth a ton. Because I'm going to look it up on
Radiant Dawn was another one that's up there, but not as Path of Radiance. Those 2 games are pretty up there. Other than that,
yeah.
You got the 30th anniversary, which is cool. It's attainable. You can get it somewhere.
Path of Radiance, by the way, currently price charting over at pricecharting.com, $420 complete in boxed, if you want to copy.
Is that USD or Canadian?
That is Canadian. So USD,
okay.
$313, which is still a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. It's not the most expensive game on GameCube, though, but it is one of the more expensive games on GameCube. Because GameCube, GameCube is currently the hotness right now. All the GameCube games are expensive.
Is currently the hotness because Nintendo is still refusing to put anything related to GameCube on that dang Switch.
Yeah, but Radiant Dawn's another expensive one. So if you want to collect them specifically, Rebel, those are the more expensive ones if you're looking for the most expensive ones or the most desired ones from a collector standpoint.
But, and it's hard to get the older ones too because they're Japanese only, like pre GBA.
Yeah, the Super Famicom ones or the Famicom ones. Yeah. But they're not expensive. Like they made a ton of copies.
You can probably import them.
You can import them.
Fine.
Yeah. Like you could probably eBay them for like $30 or $40, like complete in box.
That's not bad.
But next up, we got Blaze Knight, who asks, how does Engage stack up against the greatest Fire Emblem game, Path of Radiance, which I think neither of us have played. So I don't think we have a lot to say about this one, unfortunately. Blaze Knight. It's a game I want to play, but it's a game that's unfortunately outside my price range to play at this point. Maybe one day.
Arg.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. But yeah, you're right. It is like it, and no one really talks about those games.
Yeah.
Like I hear like, oh, look how pricey, how valuable it is. But I'm just like, okay, is it like a good or a great game? People don't like, I haven't heard much hype or gameplay around these games specifically. And then it's really calling for a remake or at least like an HD port.
Yeah.
That would be actually kind of cool to have as an HD port of these games over on
like that and Radiant Dawn together would be a great 2-pack. Kind of like, Twilight Princess and Wind Waker would be a great.
That'd be great.
It'd be the same kind of thing. I would love to see that kind of thing, especially because those games are so connected to each other. And of course, one's on the Wii and then one's on the GameCube. So there you go. And then last question of the week comes to us from Nagachaku, who says, the real follow-up to the question from Sean Capri and the Muffin Mon's question is, which RPG franchise needs to release a full-blown dedicated dating sim game, and why is it Fire Emblem? Well, that's a good question. And honestly, I'm going to actually say Fire Emblem's a good one, but I think Persona might actually make a better dating game, if I'm being honest. I don't know. There's something about the Persona world and the characters that would make it would make for a good dating sim game, I think. But I think that or Final Fantasy, like a Final Fantasy dating sim game would be really interesting and unique. But what do you think about this, Garrett? What dating sim do you want out there?
I think I agree with you that the Persona series on average has better just writing in general, like support and character relationships. I think it would be good for dating sim. Like you actually have character choices. Um, a full-on dating similar with Fire Emblem, you're gonna have to put some extra stuff in there, some
Yeah.
extra mechanics. There's a lot of characters
Hmm.
involved, so you can do a lot of dating. It's just that it's all talk. It's just talk, 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 talk. There's no choice. There's no like there's in Three Houses. There's actually pretty good support character conversations, but in this game, oh boy, let me tell you, Chloe literally watched me wake up. Is like, I want to
Yep.
put a bed next to you so I can watch you sleep
Yep.
and wake up. And I'm like, what the hell? This woman just wants to stare at me sleeping. Like,
And you
it's
see, this
the
is a
writing is
problem, Garrett?
it's not a problem. It's just it's super weird writing
Yeah.
in conversation. So yeah,
Well,
they'll
especially
just
if
have
you're
to
not
iron
trying
stuff
to,
out.
romance her. I can get why that would be weird. But yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think a Fire Emblem one would be interesting. Again, there'd be a
Yeah.
lot of choice with the character, but that's not how dating sims work. Usually the dating sims will give you a set of 5 to 7 characters to choose from, depending on where the route goes, and it is all talking and all choices. So they'd have to narrow it down, Garrett, between all the characters. Whereas, in Persona, you usually have a limited number of party members you can romance, anyways, or confidants you can romance, which is why I actually thought it made more sense. Because it kind of makes sense in the knowing the mold of dating sims. Because of course, Garrett, I've played dating sims in my day. I know how dating sims work.
Yes.
Usually that's how dating sims work, anyways. But
Cool.
anyways, I think
Sounds
that's going to wrap up this episode of the RPG Cave. But before we go, Garrett, where can people find you on the internet, good sir?
You can just follow me at Twitter at Blind Explosion, and that's pretty much it. Don't follow me anywhere else.
Yeah.
I'm not active anywhere else. Don't try to search me on Mastodon or
Yeah.
whatever other social networks.
What
You
about
can find me on
MySpace,
the
though?
Discord though. I may or may not still have my MySpace
Oh,
open
jeez.
from 2006 or
Okay.
5 or whenever that was. But you can find me on the Discord. I am pretty active on the RPG Cave channel over
Yeah.
there, more than the other channels. Let's say I favor the RPG Cave channel.
I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why, Garrett.
I
Good
couldn't
question.
understand why either. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty active on the PSVG Discord as well. So check me out over there.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at http://www.twitter.com/Ryan Turford. Also, I just wanted to point out next week's, folks, is Valentine's Day. And boy, howdy, we have a really special episode for y'all next week on Valentine's Day. So I'm actually so excited for that episode. I can't wait for y'all to see that. So tune in next week because I think we're having an interesting episode for that. But you can also find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Carpool Gaming, on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 82nd level of the RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye bye.